Hey, welcome everybody to Seniors. And the music you just heard, I think, kind of fits my guest today. I looked for something that was kind of hard hitting, driving, and of course, I love a B3 organ in the background, so that played a part of it. Today, I have Jason Brick on my podcast, and I prepared several intros for Jason because I found so much information on him. I even asked him. I told him AI to find some stuff, and boy, AI was interesting. But I'm just going to read from his book, what's actually on his book, and we're going to be talking a lot about this today, which is called "Safest Family on the Block." And he's got one in his hand. I have one in my hand, and the background you see today is not typical of my senior to seniors background. I have superheroes here, and I told Jason I have the superheroes because the fact is no one's coming to save you. You have to take care of yourself, and you have to protect yourself. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. So let me just read a little bit about Jason without seeing him blush a little too much, and the beard will cover some of that up. So he's in good shape here. Here's what it says on his book. It says, kick fear to the curb, learn how to keep your family safe without stress. Further, it says, no matter who makes up your family unit, their safety is your top concern. At home, at school, at work, around town, safety comes first. Renowned safety expert Jason Brick has done the hard work for you, distilling 101 tips, tricks, hacks, and habits to keep you and your family safe. Checklists are included. And in 10 easy to read chapters, each focusing on an important area of family safety, Jason breaks down simple, actionable steps you can do today towards a safer and a more resilient family. Now, in Jason in particular, Jason, don't mean to take too much of our time here, but I think it's important that people know a little bit about you. Jason is a career journalist, podcast host, father of two sons, husband, homeowner, and member of a multi generational family dwelling. His hobbies include martial arts, travel, role playing games, and arguing with strangers on the internet. We're kind of strangers, so I hope there's no argument here today. He lives with his family of seven people, three cats, and various quadrupeds, which I've never used that word in my life. I had to look it up because I didn't know. Four-legged creatures is what I believe it is. Occupying the treehouse, Jason resides in Hillsboro, Oregon, and that's especially attractive to me because I lived in Bend, Oregon, just about, I don't know, 3 hours from Hillsboro for 20 years of my life before moving here to Texas. So, Jason, I've taken up a lot of time, but I thought I needed to tell a little bit about you. Welcome so much. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
So tell us, why'd you write this book? I mean, how did you come? You've done a lot of things in your life. Um, why did you write this particular book?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll distill it as much as I can. And that was I spent the first half of my adult life in the martial arts and security spheres. I ran a martial arts school. I was a tournament fighter, did some bodyguard work, did some bouncing, that kind of thing. And then one month, we had a kid. And it wasn't, this was an in family adoption from some cousins who became medically incapable of keeping their kids safe anymore.
Okay, all right.
So this wasn't, have a good time trying for a year with your wife and then having 9 months to figure stuff out. And it wasn't a more traditional adoption, which also has a timeline in years. It was all of a sudden we were going to have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
the weekend before this child came into our lives, I was at a martial arts training thing. And at that point, I was fourth degree black belt, had a stack of certificates and all that. I kind of thought I was a badass,
Yeah, yeah.
but we were working weapons disarms. And I just noticed how many of these disarms would keep me safe, but would, for example, point the barrel of a gun about 2.5 feet from the floor directly behind me, which is where my kid would be standing.
Right,
And I just realized how little of what I'd learned up to that point did me any good in protecting a small, helpless life.
right.
And I was fortunate enough to have some very, very good coaches. And what they taught me is when I find out something that I don't know, I go find who knows and ask them.
Hmm.
And I went out to experts, people, when I say I did bodyguard work, I mean, I was the guy whose cousin called you when he was gonna go pay cash for a car in a seedy part of town. I never worked with celebrities. I never worked with, the big time. But I knew some guys who did. So I called them and I asked them about ways, physical moves that would protect my kid if there was a gun or something like that.
Hmm.
But then I noticed talking to them that, yeah, they knew that stuff, but also they always had a first aid kit. They always counted water bottles before they went on a hike. They kept the car half full of gas no matter what. They paid very close attention to what shoes they had on. There were all these not martial artsy things that they considered way more important than the punching and the kicking and the stabbing and the shooting. And so I kind of from there set out to find as many experts on keeping kids safe as I could and just wringing them dry of information.
Yeah.
And the result of that was this book after 100 interviews with one thing that I think was really important, kind of like I just alluded to, was that when people think family safety, they often immediately think of crime prevention.
Yeah.
We would have a police officer on for that, or there was a CIA agent who came on to talk about things, and we had people like that on. But I also talked to nutritionists and psychologists and firefighters and EMTs, and I mentioned before we hopped on, I got on the phone with somebody who spent 20 years managing retirement homes to give us some insights on how to make sure my parents are safe, and then
Right.
me, and not too long at all. And so, after more than 100 interviews with this wide variety of experts, the book came out because every single one of them had at least one really cool, important piece of information I didn't. And I wanted to make it easier for other people to find that info.
Well, it's a great handbook for anybody to have in their home. And you can tell that you talk to a lot of people. You got a lot of opinions from people, and there are things in there that I wouldn't have ever thought about. Like you mentioned, in martial arts, you learn how to defend yourself and so forth, but the practical things you don't talk about. So tell me about techniques that you've outlined in your book that adapt to the unique challenges that are faced by seniors, Jason, because my show is really about seniors, for seniors, addressing issues and entertainment and so forth for seniors. But what unique challenges have you outlined in your book that seniors can pick up and run with?
Absolutely. And I'm a whippersnapper when it comes to being a senior. I'm only 52, so I'm just beginning this, but some of the things do apply pretty strongly. I don't know what annoys me more, that I have a subscription to the AARP magazine or that I find the content so interesting and useful. I'm not one of those bother me.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest ones is the concept of discretionary time. For example, if you're walking from the concert to your car with your wife,
Hmm.
and a guy jumps out of a doorway with a gun, you've got microseconds to make decisions. If while you're parking the car before the show, you make a decision to park in a place that's well lit and on a well trod path, now you've got much more time to figure stuff out. If before you go to the show, you do some research into the locations and make a plan about, well, you know what, maybe we'll go to the show with our friends. So there's four of us walking because the larger the group you're with, the amount of risk goes down. And that's not just from crime prevention. That's for somebody slips and falls. That's
Hmm.
for civil unrest. That's for anything else. And so the further ahead that we can think and act, the better off we are. And I'm an aging jock. I'm a middle aged going on to senior jock.
Hmm.
I'm not the guy I was in my 20s,
Hmm.
and none of us are.
Yeah.
And coming to terms with that, and then realizing that we don't have the affordances, we don't have the buffer that we once did. And making plans for that, intelligent plans about how to manage those things, is probably the best overarching thought we can give to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just in you talking about that, I'm thinking of a personal experience just a couple of weeks ago. I went to some car races, dirt track races here in Texas, something I usually don't do, in a crowd that I'm usually not mixed with. And when I parked for convenience, not safety. I parked, and now that I think of it, and as you were talking, and it came, the picture came to mind. I backed up to a bunch of bushes and trees. And thinking about it now, when I left a little early, left my son and my wife back. My back was hurting. So I went to the car a little bit early, but it was totally dark. And thinking about it, someone could have easily been in the bushes, come out of the bushes, and they could have taken me down so easy. And I I didn't even think about that till now. I didn't think about it at the time. And yeah, I could have been in a bit of trouble because I wouldn't have been able to defend myself. There's no doubt about it. So that's a good tip. And there's tips like that throughout the book. So tell
And I
me
think
about.
an important point to add to that is, with the darkness, crime, especially violent crime, is still thankfully very rare in the developed world in North America.
Yeah.
But there could have been a rock, and you could have slipped and fallen, broken your arm,
Hmm.
and be there where no one's walking by for who knows how long, in the dark, so cars are going by don't see you. So the crime, we always think about crime, but there's so many other things that, and I don't say this to scare people because we were all still wandering around, most of us uninjured, all of us still alive.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
just there's ways that we can think to just make things a little safer, a little easier for all of us.
Yeah, that's a great tip because there's no doubt the turf that I walked on, it was not made, it was not a paved parking lot. It was, just a dirt hilly kind of place. Roots were coming out of the ground. I could have easily fallen. And in addition, I only had one bar on my phone, so I probably couldn't have even called anybody to get help until somebody finally came. And with the cars being so loud, no one would have heard me yelling, because the
Yeah.
cars were making all the noise. So let's talk about mindset for a minute,
Mhm.
and preparing the right mindset uh, in life and preparing for safety. So talk about mindset. What kind of mindset should we all be in life and in general?
And so I have a strong opinion about this, and I'm largely outvoted. If you talk to the tactical community, the self-defense instructors, they'll often talk about something called the Cooper color codes, which is a way of kind of organizing and codifying thoughts about awareness. And it starts with condition white, where, this is you're completely safe and you don't need to pay attention. This is in your bed, going to sleep with the doors locked and the alarm on, right?
Mhm.
And then
Right.
condition yellow is where they advise you be in the world, where kind of a sense of awareness, head on a swivel, sit with your back to the wall and your face towards the door kind of vibe. And it goes all the way up to condition red, where you're actively engaging with a threat. Now, I don't particularly like this for a couple of reasons. One is it was developed for law enforcement and military people who go out on missions and then come back. So, you go out into a mission, you're taking your shift as a police officer, you're going on patrol in the military. You have to be alert and aware, head on a swivel back to the wall. But then after you come back, other armed men go out and do that job while you can relax.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
it's a good policy for that situation, but it's a hell of a way to live. That level of paranoia, that level of concentrated alertness is exhausting.
Hmm.
What I really recommend rather is more what I call tactical curiosity. Just paying attention, especially for things that seem and feel weird. Put the phone in the pocket, look around. If something's moving where things aren't usually moving, maybe get a couple of extra feet away from it and pay a little closer attention to it. If nothing's moving, places where you expect things to move, pay attention to that.
Yeah.
The best example is you go you go into a bar, right? Some bars are naturally noisy, some bars are naturally quiet. Whether it's quiet or noisy doesn't tell you anything about how safe the bar is. But if you're in a quiet bar and it suddenly gets loud, or if you're in a loud bar that suddenly gets quiet, it's time to pay attention,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the advantage of this idea, to me at least, that kind of that tactical curiosity is that not only does it keep you safe, But you also see the sunsets and that cat walking by that wants to scratch behind the ears. You see the good things as well as the bad.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So tell me about seniors securing their homes. Many seniors feel that securing their homes requires significant resources to do that,
Yeah.
and that it's very costly. You talk about in your book that you can secure your front door, for example, in 5 minutes for only $2, for
Yeah.
example. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I'm thinking alarms and all kinds of other things. So talk about those resources that seniors may not have thought about, that they thought might just be beyond what they could afford.
Sure thing. There's a couple of very simple ones. And again, this is crime prevention, but you can do very similar things for to help with other stuff. You go to Home Depot, you spend $10 on 3-inch screws and about 6 to 12 feet of dowel.
Okay.
And then you come home and you go to your front door and the little I'm not great at DIY stuff and I always forget the name of it, but the metal plate where the
Okay.
tongue from the lock goes in.
Hmm.
That's if that's attached with the hardware that came with the plate, it's attached by like a 1/2 inch screw, 1/4 inch screw.
Yeah.
That's a crackhead with a boot's gonna go right through that.
Hmm.
So you go get your screw gun, take that out, put in those 3-inch screws instead, and all of a sudden that door is substantially more secure. A determined person with enough time will get through it, but they're going to make a lot of noise, and you'll
Sure.
know they're going to be able to execute whatever your family home invasion plan is.
Simple.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's quick. And then the other thing is, you take those dowels. If you have side opening windows, side opening glass sliders, you just cut them into the right length and drop them in there. I think most of us have lived in a house at one point or another where there was a closet rod style dowel down in the trough of a glass slider that helped reinforce the door. You just do that for all the windows and doors in the house. It'll take you half of an afternoon and $10 worth of supplies.
Yeah. Just real simple. So one of the things you talk about are transforming family vacations, and a lot of seniors will take family vacations with their grandkids and so forth, with their kids and grandkids, and so you talk about those to building family vacations into safety building experiences. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that as you plan your trip, that planning process is very similar to what bodyguards, executive protection specialists call an advance, which is the process they go through to make sure that somebody they're protecting takes a trip safely. The best example a lot of people are familiar with. You remember that movie from the '90s with Clint Eastwood, In the Line of Fire, with John
Yeah.
Malkovich, the bad guy.
Yeah.
There's a montage of the Secret Service getting the hotel ready,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they're just chasing. And of course, we can't do that. We don't have the money or the time, but we can create a smaller scaled down version of that where we take a look at where we're going and use resources online and personal resources to get a sense for what kind of hazards are there, what's the weather like, what kind of diseases are there, what is the crime situation, how's the traffic, should you drive
Yeah.
or trust a local, what all of those things. And then you look at who's going, and what are the needs and abilities of those folks. As do we have grandkids who have a mobility issue, or maybe they're on the autism spectrum and they get overstimulated very easily, in which case an Indian market is not necessarily going to be a good time for everybody.
Yeah.
And what are our own concerns? Like realistically, how long can we walk in 100-degree heat before we need to sit down and have a beer? And just kind of take the place you're going, the people you're going with, and then what are the things we want to do, and make plans for doing that in a fun way and in a safe way, and involve our kids in those plans as much as possible, so that we're kind of modeling this way of applying a safety mindset to everything without being scary.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
without ruining the whole
yeah,
thing because everybody's so uptight that they're going to be scared to death, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Mm, great tip. And so, talk about smart home technology because a lot of seniors, don't know how to leverage um, technology, but it can enhance your family safety without a lot of complexity. What do you recommend as far as, smart home technology? Simple things that you might recommend.
And that's going to depend a whole lot on what you're most concerned about. If you're worried about home invasions and burglary, then some of those Wi-Fi cameras, like Ring is the brand that we use here at the house, and
Yeah.
solar lights work really well. If you're worried about fire, then you can use some smart home technologies that can give alerts for fire and carbon monoxide. There's home intercom systems you can put in if you're concerned about maybe you have a family member who's a falling risk,
Hmm.
so that they can immediately summon help from whatever room is in the house. Or if, as we're getting on in years, maybe we're a falling risk and we can have automatic alerts that will text our kid who lives in the next town over,
Hmm. Hmm.
if we fall down, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of things over there. The important thing is that the more smart devices we add to our home network, the more vulnerabilities we have to people who might want to hack us and attack our banking information and things like that. So really recommend, I mean, if you're I'm pretty dumb about tech. I outsource my tech knowledge to a couple of good friends, and now these days my kids. Uh, but if you're starting to onboard these, it's worth springing for the extra money to have a professional come out and make sure that your home network's secure.
Yeah, and do it right. Yeah, because we're all vulnerable to hackers and so forth. There's no doubt about that. A lot of seniors, when they retire, they lose their focus. They lose their attention to be able to continue adding to their community and having a purpose. Generally, having a purpose. How can seniors? What role can they play on making their town, their neighborhood safer? What are some things that seniors who think they can't do anything because they're too old, but what can seniors do to help make their neighborhood safer?
Well, a couple of really good ones are take up gardening. Throw a couple of gardening containers in your front yard, and then you're just out there on the street a couple hours a day taking care of the plants, picking the tomatoes and whatnot. And then you see the people in the neighborhood walking by. And after a while, you get to know which people are walking by, and then which people, hey, I don't know you. And then you can say, oh, hey, how's it going? And usually a person who's not up to something, you would say, hey, how's it going? I'm Jason.
Hmm.
If they'll say, oh, we're Terry and Stephanie, we're cousins of the Johnsons down the block. You
Hmm.
know, and without being kind of that noisy, typical front porch neighbor that get made fun of all the time in sitcoms, but that friendly, chatty neighbor, and that's a good one. And also, you have the benefit of having some really yummy vegetables, which
Hmm.
also helps.
Yeah.
Joining Neighborhood Watch, of course, and this is across the board for safety because Neighborhood Watch is about crime prevention, but it's also about getting to know your neighbors. If you get to know your neighbors, then you know which neighbor is an ER nurse and can be at your house in a minute and a half instead of the 7 minute response time of the ambulance service in your town.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if power breaks down because there's a storm, you know which one of your neighbors spent their career as an electrician.
Hmm.
And you
Hmm.
can pool those resources. You get to know the people and their interests and their abilities. And I guarantee you also somebody on your block has the same hobby you have. So you got a new buddy to play board games with or talk model trains with or what have you. And then the
Good.
third one, and I think this is especially powerful for seniors, is volunteer at the local school. If you've got kids and grandkids in your area, at your kids' school, if not, just whatever school is nearest. It contributes immensely to the community. It helps kids feel seen and cared for, which is a huge way to help make your entire community safer. And also, not for nothing, if you volunteer and are popular at the school for a long time, when that kid's 14 and starting to make dumb decisions, he might say, oh, no, 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 guys, no, no, that's Mr. Mazziotti's car. We can't mess with him.
Yeah.
He's nice. You know,
Yeah.
so you put those three things together, and it creates stuff to do. It creates a way to engage with the community, and it directly applies safety. And also, Tai Chi,
Okay.
absolutely Tai Chi. As we know, with every year after about 55, our chances of falling down get greater and greater and greater and greater. And the long term penalties, as it were, for falling down get greater and greater and greater and greater. And Tai Chi is one of the best low impact ways to practice and maintain and continue keeping our balance good.
Huh. I'm surprised. I'm in the Stel Web community that I live in, and I hope that most of the people in this area, there's about 400 homes here, listen to this podcast, and others, of course. But I haven't seen Tai Chi being offered at our center for some reason. So that's a good tip to ask the person that manages our amenity center, why can't we? They do balance and that kind of thing, but core strength. But
Yeah.
Tai Chi is part of that as well. And so that's a great tip. And just knowing who you live around and who your neighbors are, how important is that? Because so many people, and one of the major chronic illnesses right now is said to be loneliness,
Yeah.
especially with seniors. And, there's no reason to be lonely volunteering at your school, for example. They need your help.
Yeah.
I've got kids that are teachers. They definitely need your help. There's so many volunteer things at your local hospital, for example. And so escape the loneliness and actually contribute to your community is a great tip. So you told me, and of course I read about you that, listen, this isn't just one book and done. You're a very busy guy doing a lot of different things. And talk to us about books that you have coming in the future. So if my listeners decide to purchase your book, and I hope they do, that's what it looks like, Safest Family on the Block by Jason Brick. But so what do you have coming? I'm excited about one of the things you mentioned, but tell us what you've got coming.
Sure thing. Now, I'm still a working journalist, working freelance writer. I love, I don't ever want to have a real job again, so I write a lot. But in the safety sphere in particular, we've got two follow-up books from Safety's Family on the Block in the pipe. The first one is basically the same book, only written for teens, which was
Okay.
recommended to us by some buyers organizations for libraries and school libraries. Apparently, those are very needed, and a lot
Okay.
of the information we can apply to those. Also, Safest Family on the Block is intended as a series with Safest Family on the Road about travel, Safest Family in the School about schools. Safest Senior on the Block is a title that's coming, and I'm doing some web resources on that very soon as well. It's inspired by a recent interview with a woman who, as I told you before the show, spent 20 years managing retirement homes and has some really smart advice. As an example, when I asked her, about how do we find out which of the ones are high quality and which of the ones are downright negligent,
Yeah.
she pointed out that, well, you don't ask the staff because they're not going to tell you the answer. You don't ask the government oversight people because they're bound to kind of a neutrality by the rules and ethics of what they do. What you do is you go to the nearest hospital, and you talk to some of the ER staff, some of the nurses in the ER,
Wow.
because they see the results and they notice and they're
Mhm.
mad about it.
And
So
they,
you go in there and you ask, you find somebody who knows somebody and take them out for coffee and ask. And they'll tell you, well, the people over at Coral Gables, when we see those people, it's very rare and it's usually for some weird accident.
mhm.
But man, over at Green Heights, we see those guys every week, and it's so much of it is bed sores and neglect. Don't ever.
Yeah.
And they know and they care and they're mad about it. And so they are the people who will tell you the truth.
Yeah. Uh, And part of my mission, Jason, and just for listeners and yourself, is not only to be a real estate agent, because there's tens of thousands of real estate agents. Most of them are the same. And they have a particular goal. It's to get deals. One of the words that I absolutely hate in the business is deals. But
most of them have not taken, they might have taken a course or two, for instance, in understanding seniors' needs and so forth. But part of my mission is what you talked about, understanding what nursing homes, what facilities are safe, or at least who to talk to. So when I have somebody down the block that's fallen, and usually, when people have to go to to special care, it's because of a accident that happened like now. It wasn't building up to something. Of course, there's that. It's usually trauma, and it's we need this right now kind of a thing. And so many people make choices without knowing about the facility that they're going to and may only go to them because they're available. And so great tip. Understanding, which ones are safe and talking to the right people. When you wrote your book, was there something that sparked you? Was there a spark that said you need to write this book? Can you share a personal story that inspired you? Is there one story, Jason?
So there's the story of, having my kid. And that point, your superhero's background really examines it. I think that most people, most parents, when we have our kids, there's that point where our brain goes, huh, I ought to call a parent. And then you realize, oh, no, no, wait, I'm the parent.
Hmm.
That's my responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that. The time it came for me was when we adopted a 7-year-old, and he lights out down the beach at 100 miles an hour. It seemed like,
Mhm.
huh, somebody ought to make sure he comes. Oh wait, I oughta. And just those early experiences of that transition from being very competent at taking care of myself to realizing how incompetent I was at taking care of kids. And then the number of little details that surprised me in those early interviews. Of the first one was, again, I was talking to a bodyguard. This is a guy who ran security for major hair bands in the 80s. A tough guy.
Mhm.
But early on in his book, what he advised is you take the next time you buy a pair of sneakers or hiking shoes, you put the new ones on, you take the old ones in the back of and you put them in your trunk. And you do that so that the next time your car breaks down or you get in an accident on the way home from date night and your wife's in stilettos, or you're on the way home from the beach and you're just wearing your flip flops, you have a nice, comfy, broken in pair of shoes right there to walk to the gas station in.
Yeah.
And it's like, I never would have occurred to me in a million years,
Me neither.
but so smart.
Yeah. Jumper cables, yes.
Yeah.
Extra shoes, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Never would have thought of it. And so the number of people who all had just some little thing like that.
Hmm.
And it just, and realized, man, I don't know anything. And I'm sure, and I've been paying unusual amount of attention to this.
Yeah.
So a lot of other people should have this info too.
Yeah.
And, I was able to contribute my own. I haven't heard anybody else give this advice about you got a kid who's old enough to get away from you in a crowd, for example, but so young that they don't know your phone number yet.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, just take their favorite device and change the password to your phone number. They'll know it inside of 24 hours,
Okay. Got it.
right?
Yeah.
Because then they'll have it. And
Interesting.
just those little things over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
I kept encountering.
Well, I'm glad you wrote it. So how can a senior
Mhm.
pass this book down? Because I intend to pass this down to my son, who's actually, once a Marine, always a Marine, but was a Marine, can certainly take care of himself and can certainly take orders and do what needs to be done. I'm not so sure that he thinks about, the safety of his kids like I didn't when I was his age. So how can a senior pass your book down to people in the family without sounding alarmist, without sounding like, oh God, it's just dad, it's just mom being over the top again. How can we do that in a way that will sink in?
So here's my theory. This isn't something I've done yet because my oldest hasn't had a kid yet. But and this really interacts with something that's been a real interesting part of my journey through this, which is there's a bunch of stuff in this book that are not the way that I was raised.
Hmm.
And in some cases, because my two boys are 10 years apart, it's not the way I raised my oldest one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I started really getting into this when the youngest was a kid and the oldest was a teenager. So the oldest one teases me about, hey, where was this energy when I was 16?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
he and I are friendly enough and we like to joke, so we just call him the rough draft. But
And that's true, right? That's just
yeah, yeah, we're better parents the more kids we have. That's because we get the experience and practice. But the point is that maybe approaching it from a hey, here's some things I wish I'd done different when I was raising you, and I really hope that maybe we can do different with the kids. This is the example that I didn't know I was supposed to provide at the time, so I didn't. That might be a way of getting in there, and also just kind of scan it for the things that are cool. Your
Mhm.
son's a Marine, so he's gonna respond to the tactical stuff, to the athletic stuff,
Right.
and there are ways to bring that in. If you want to talk him into volunteering at the local high school, definitely get him to volunteer coaching the wrestling team. He's probably not going to be the guy to go over to the arts and crafts.
Right. That's
You
not
know,
him. Exactly.
you know your kid's interests, and just kind of pick him onto that, and also just gifting the book,
Yeah.
have it lying around, put it on the back of the toilet. He'll read it eventually. His phone's got to run out of batteries sometime.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
And that's actually another piece. It's very similar to another piece of information in the book about when we're talking about sex ed, which is just not every family. We should be able to talk directly, but not everybody kid's going to come to us with the questions. But just one of the drawers in the kid's bathroom has a couple of books that are congruent with your family's values
Right.
and opinions about sex education.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable with it as a family, include some condoms in there so that they can get the tools and the information
At the same time.
seamlessly. And then you just go in there and restock once every couple of months.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So
Yeah.
I always ask my guests, what's the one question I didn't ask that I should have?
I do that at the end of all my episodes on my show, and everybody gets stumped every time. So I should be better prepared for this.
Yeah.
But no, I would probably ask, what are the most important things we can do so we can continue to not act our age?
Okay. Explain that. Explain that.
So I asked this of my doctor a couple years ago, my physical, and realized, I was turning 50, and that year I had run a marathon and been in mosh pits in 3 different states. And I just asked him, how can I continue to act like a 20-year-old without injuring myself?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's use it or lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing to our cardio,
Mm-hmm.
cardio especially, because the kinds of things you look at the main cause of death for seniors, half of them boil down to cardio
Yeah.
and diet, right?
Yeah.
And then also, if you're walking, if you're jogging, if you're biking, if you're swimming, whatever you like best, your health is up. You're practicing your balance. You're strengthening your body so that if you fall down or bump your head or trip on the carpet or whatnot, you're more likely to have it just sting for a couple of days instead of being an ER visit.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing for any of us who are parents, because that's my jam,
Yeah.
cardio sucks. It's not fun.
Yeah.
And if we're even, in our 50s, in our 60s, in our 70s, in our 80s, modeling doing this thing that's good for us, even though it sucks because it's good for us, our kids are going to see that. Our grandkids are going to see that. The people our kids marry are going to see that. And
Mm-hmm.
we're continuing to lead by example, well, further down into our lives.
Yeah.
So, it's that the importance of regular cardio training is just immense.
Yeah. Well, good advice. And listen, there were your 101 tips and tricks and in your book were excellent. I'm so glad I picked it up and found you and that you agreed to talk to us all today. How can people reach you? What's if they want to talk to you? What's the best way for them to get in touch?
I love nerding out about this stuff. So please reach out if you have any questions. If you think I'm full of it, reach out and tell me why. And I'll either argue with you or go, son of a bitch, and then
Yeah.
change what I'm saying.
Yeah.
My email address is brickcommajason@gmail.com. That's spelled out BRICKCOMMAJASON.
Okay.
You can find me on Facebook. I'm very active there, Jason Brick. There's 7 or 8 of us, but far as I can tell, I'm the only one who's talking about personal safety, martial arts, tabletop role-playing games, and heavy metal on the same day. You'll be able to track me down. safestfamilyontheblock.org is the website. The YouTube channel is Safest Family on the Block. Any of those, you can find me pretty easily, and I'm
Yeah.
pretty
Well,
responsive.
yeah, you're all over the place, so people are going to be able to find you. And interesting guy. And you live in a place that I wish I did, and maybe we'll live there someday. But Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope we talk again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.